The Broncos are a historically winning franchise, having been to 8 Super Bowls in total and winning 3 of them. That means almost 20% of Super Bowls in the history of the NFL have had the Broncos. That's more Super Bowl wins than over half the league, and more appearances than 2/3 of it. But the last decade has been different. For 9 years straight, the Broncos couldn't make the playoffs in a division dominated by the Chiefs, who are in the midst of one of the greatest dynasties of all time. Denver had been cast to the shadows, fighting for the number 1 pick more than for Super Bowls. That all changed last season. Heading into Sean Payton's second year as the head coach of the team, the Broncos reached draft night with one goal in mind: get a quarterback. And that they did. Nix didn't just become the starter right away. Alongside last year's Defensive Player of the Year, Pat Surtain, they surprised the whole league and led the team to its first playoff appearance since 2015. Despite a disappointing loss in the playoffs, that was only the epilogue to this story. Yo, what is everybody? Welcome back to another episode here on Breaker Sports. It's your boy Dom, and we're going to jump right into things here today. Now, obviously, by that intro, we are talking about none other than my favorite team in the Denver Broncos, a team that was not supposed to do what they did last season, and a team that, frankly, has been a very hard team to be a fan of over the last 5 or 6 years, just due to the lack of success, the lack of direction. But all of that changed. All of that changed not too long ago. We've drafted very well ever since having George Paton come into the front office, and Sean Payton turned the team around after trading for him and him coming out of retirement from the Saints to come and be the head coach of the team. And man, what a year it was. What a year it was. We were not supposed to be 10-7. We were not supposed to be in a playoff game. And that's exactly where we were. We set ourselves up for this season with super high expectations of where can we take going to the playoffs last year, and how far can we go with a quarterback coming into his second year in Bo Nix, who put up numbers akin to what the MVP of the league, Josh Allen, did last year. I know at the end of the season there were a ton of graphics, at least from Broncos fans, comparing those stats, and obviously Josh Allen was a phenomenal player last season, deserved the MVP. In my opinion, will probably end up winning this year's MVP as well. But Bo Nix was right there with him. Bo Nix was right there with him as an older quarterback coming out of Oregon. Exactly what you wanted from him and beyond what the ceiling you thought of a rookie quarterback for his age especially could have done. He superseded all expectations that anyone could have had. It's kind of funny, coming into last year's draft, he was not my top quarterback. I mean, when I look at what my quarterback rankings were, it was Caleb Williams. Obviously, we all thought Caleb Williams was going to be the guy. He struggled more than Bo Nix did last year, right? Second up, I was really early on Jaden Daniels, but I still never believed that he would be as good as he is, or at least as good as he was, leading them to the NFC Championship as a rookie. So Bo Nix and him kind of both had these kind of parallel stories in the opposite divisions of these rookie QBs taking their teams, and teams that had been bad for quite a while, to heights that fans of the teams didn't think could happen, fans of even the quarterbacks coming into the league didn't think could happen, and really, I think, surprising a ton of people. And, following Jaden Daniels, I thought Michael Penix coming out of Washington was a stud. We'll see what he does with the Falcons this year, as he only got some limited time last year, but I thought he was better than Bo. I thought that Drake May was going to be better than Bo. I didn't have Bo top 3 or even top 4 in my quarterback ranking coming into the draft last year. I had Bo Nix as the 5th quarterback, and I'm glad to say that I was proven wrong. Bo Nix showed out and had a wonderful rookie season. I mean, this whole QB clash puts itself in a position coming into the second year and going forward into the future to be one of the greatest QB classes of all time. Obviously, you have Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix that look to now kind of position themselves as upper echelon QBs going into the next couple of years, but you still have guys like Caleb Williams, who just got Ben Johnson to come be his head coach. We saw what Ben Johnson was able to do with the Detroit Lions and Jared Goff. You have a guy like Drake May, who just got, I think, a stud of a head coach, right? In Vrabel coming over from the Titans. They move on, they go with a different regime. Well, Vrabel takes a little bit of time, goes to the Patriots, and now they have a chance to do something. He gets Diggs as a receiver. We saw what Diggs did for Josh Allen. Obviously, I don't think Stephon Diggs is the exact same as he was when he went to Buffalo, but we all know what adding a receiver does to a young quarterback. And then even over in Minnesota, you have a QB guru at head coach, and you have JJ McCarthy, who personally I thought was the worst quarterback of the first round that was taken. I couldn't believe that he was taken in the first round last year, but he's following Sam Darnold, who just had a career resurgence there. So with all of the talent in this first round, I didn't even mention Michael Penix, who has all the weapons around him in Atlanta that he could ever need, especially if Kyle Pitts, learns how to catch a football like Kyle Pitts should. That's just a fantasy player in me, I guess, talking right there, because yeah, he burned me a couple years ago. We don't have to talk about it. But yeah, I mean, all of these quarterbacks are in positions to really be not just starters in this league, but be stars in this league. And Bo Nix is right at the top of that, right? And what he was able to do with the Broncos as a rookie last season was nothing short of phenomenal. Obviously, that's looking, coming into a team where not only was he an older rookie, there was some questions, a ton of dead cap, and we still have lingering dead cap from cutting Russell Wilson. But there wasn't necessarily this receiving core that was like out of the moon over this world that was going to set him up for success right away. Obviously, you had an established guy in Cortland who goes and gets 1,000 yards last year, but there wasn't even really a second guy last year. I mean, Marvin Mims had the second most receiving yards, but a guy that we just traded in, Devon Vele, who was a 7th round rookie, we just, traded him to the Saints for a 4th round pick. That was the 3rd highest receiver last year. That shows you how weak this receiving core was, which is why the team attacked it not only in last year's draft, in this year's draft, and has tried to bolster the running back room to kind of complement that, as the running back room last year was still not that great. Javonte Williams didn't fall back into form as the electric player that he was, as a rookie, as a sophomore year player. Obviously, coming back from injury, he just wasn't able to quite grasp that spark that he had, which really sucks for me. I'm a huge Javonte fan, have a Javonte jersey, but yeah, he was the leading rusher on the team last year at 513 yards. Jaleel McLaughlin wasn't far behind him at 496, and Bo Nix was 3rd at 430 yards. It was almost a running back by committee last year, including the quarterback. And then obviously you have Audric Estime up there, who was also cut headed into this season. So definitely a lot of turnover in both the wide receiver and the running back room. We hope to see some more success come of that coming into this next season, not only with some development from Marvin Mims that we saw later in the season, but it looked like Troy Franklin, wow, I cannot say his name apparently, started to kind of get his feet in the water and understand the position at the NFL level at the end of last season, especially in the playoff game where he was able to make that huge play. And then he's been a standout through preseason and through training camp. So you hope to see a little bit more progression out of him. But if you don't see that progression out of those guys, the Broncos were prepared for that. In the 3rd round, we see them go get Pat Bryant, a guy that, I think a lot of people see Sean trying to mold into his Mike Evans, right? Obviously, saying Pat Bryant would ever be Mike Evans is disrespectful to who Mike Evans was at his peak, because Mike Evans at his peak was the best wide receiver in all of football, and that was with prime Julio Jones right across the street in Atlanta, right? Like, he was a legit superstar. So saying Pat Bryant's going to be that is obviously super far off. But you go from a guy like Lil Jordan Humphrey, you go get Pat Bryant, kind of more of that in between where, yes, he's going to have that hustle, he's going to have that heart, but hopefully you can pull more of that talent out of him. And then in case, the picks of Franklin, the picks of Bryant don't work out, Marvin Mims doesn't take that extra step, they go get the Joker that, Sean Payton was talking about all offseason. It was almost the point of saying anything Broncos football related was the Joker. And I kind of got sick of hearing the term in relation to the receiving room, but they go get him. They go get Evan Ingram right at the start of free agency, sign him to a 2-year deal, and having a tight end for Bo that's going to be a consistent threat, going from probably the worst tight end room in the entire NFL last season to a team that's clearly trying to improve on it, clearly taking swings at it. And Evan Ingram's going to play a lot of slot receiver. Like, he's not just lining up, in line, taking some blocks. No. He's going to play a lot like how the Raiders use Brock Bowers. A lot of times he's going to be split out. A lot of times he's going to be in that slot formation. And it's just going to give a blanket guy that Bo can reliably trust time in and time out. I would not be shocked if Evan Ingram goes and gets 700 to 1,000 yards this year. I really would not be. He's been a phenomenal receiver threat at the tight end position his entire career, and that's been in Jacksonville. And I'm sorry to say, Trevor Lawrence was supposed to be better than Bo Nix, but to this point, all I've seen him do is have a lucky playoff game. And Bo Nix isn't far behind that in 1 year. So I'm just going to put that out there. I think Evan Ingram moves to a better situation for himself. Obviously, Sean Payton is a phenomenal play caller. And so we only expect improvement from the offense going into this year. You go from having Jaleel McLaughlin ending up being that second running back for you last year to a point where he's going to be the third back behind not only RJ Harvey, who they went and got in the draft, and I think can hopefully be that kind of Kamara mold of running back for Sean, that smaller guy, that out of the backfield guy, that guy that just has absolute burner speed and can get down and make plays for you. But then you also go get J.K. Dobbins, who, since having recovered from his injury, you go back to when he was with the Ravens, especially last year when he was with the Chargers, he has been a very, very good bruising back that can get downhill, holds onto the rock, and is going to get you good yardage, which is exactly what you wanted out of Javonte. But if you weren't able to get that, you're able to go get J.K. for cheap and kind of create that little duo of him and Harvey, where you have kind of the big back and then you got the small receiving back, and then McLaughlin is kind of that extra back to fill in some of the spaces. I'm sure he's still going to get used a ton on third down, where he was super efficient for us last year. And the Broncos offense looks to only be going up, right? You also have a good old line that there was a lot of investment in a couple off seasons ago. Some of those contracts are starting to come up also. And some of the younger guys, that there were swings that were taken on, like Quinn Miernes, who is now, or the belly, whatever you want to call him. He is a captain of the team for a second year in a row. He comes from a D3 school, shouldn't even be where he is, but he is the best offensive lineman on the team. And I like the direction that the offense is going. I don't think you could be doing a better way to try and surround a young quarterback. Obviously, he's not 21, 22. He's like 25, 26. But Bo Nix isn't some 40-year-old veteran quarterback that's played 10 years in the league. No, he played 10 years in college. No, all jokes aside, the offense is obviously going in the right direction. And under Sean Payton, I expect this year to be a substantial jump. I expect, last year when we came into games, it was, okay, the other team is going to be terrified of having to go against this defense. And I don't know, and obviously the defense got better, and we'll get to the defense here in a second. But I don't know if it's going to just be that mindset, because the other coaching staffs are going to have to say, well, shoot, we actually have to stop this offense. We can't just let this offense go score 25 points, and that defense is going to hold us to the point where we can't keep up. No, we got to make sure this offense doesn't blow us out of the water while the defense is suffocating our offense. Which is something nice to see. It's something that we haven't seen in a while. And stability at the quarterback position will do that. Stability for sure will do that. Then when you go over to the defensive side of the ball, man, what an offseason the Broncos had, going out and getting Hufanga as well as Dre Greenlaw. Obviously, both have had some injury issues in the past, especially Greenlaw, he hardly played last year, didn't play the entire prior. And he's still coming back from that injury that he sustained when the Niners were going against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. And so I'm sure there will be a bit of a ramp-up period. But he joins a linebacker room that's only been progressing, right? Not only do you add him, but you also have Captain Alex Singleton coming back from injury from last season. And if things end up going awry, I like Lavelle Bailey, who we moved to our practice squad, a guy that I think could end up being a starter or a rotation linebacker for this team. If not this year due to injuries, next season for sure, because I don't think we'll end up keeping Singleton. And on top of that, you have a guy like Drew Sanders, who, though he's dealt with injuries, the linebacker room does look to be heavily improved from a positional group last year, especially with all the injuries. That was kind of a weak point in what I'm going to say, and what I think most people would agree on, the best defense in the NFL had a weak position group. Like, if they had a group that was completely kind of having turnover due to injuries, didn't know who was going to play, how much they were going to play, how effective they were going to be, and a lot of guys had to step up in that position. Whereas I think this year, you now have some of that top-end talent back. You have a guy in Alex Singleton who, he played like the best linebacker in football a couple years ago before he got injured. And Dre Greenlaw played like a guy that was a bona fide and should have been bona fide number one linebacker on every team in the league, except for the Niners, because they just happened to have Fred Warner. So I think that room is going to be readily improved headed into this season. And Man, if there was ever a time to say no fly zone 2.0, it is 2025 2026 Denver Broncos DB. What a Not only do you have the reigning defensive player of the year in Pat Surtain, but you also have across from him a guy that was never supposed to do what he's done in Riley Moss, and you go out in the first round and get Jahdae Barron, kind of that joker piece on defense. Again, it was the buzzword of the offseason for the Broncos. Evan Ingram was it on offense, and Jahdae was it on defense. A guy that can play in the slot, a guy that can play boundary, a guy that can play some safety for you. It doesn't look like he's going to be starting in the slot right away. I'm sure he'll be in on nickel packages, and it looks like Riley Moss is going to get the nod as the second boundary corner next to PS2. But don't mistake that for the fact that Jahdae is going to get a lot of run and be very, very good for this team. He was super good in college, and I think he's only going to be able to build on that, especially with the players around him in this room. And then on top of that, you add Hufanga to Brandon Jones to really beef up the secondary in the back end, because after losing Justin Simmons, there was a clear deficiency at that free safety position. So bringing in Hufanga certainly shores things up. It moves a guy like PJ Locke, who had been forced into kind of a starting role with the loss of Simmons and the non-re-signing of Kareem Jackson a couple years ago. It moves him back to the bench, where I think him as a rotational safety is a much better place to be. He's a guy that can have some big hits, can have some big plays, but a lot of times if you're solely relying on this rotational safety to be a starter, we would see some issues with that. So Surtain's load has now gotten lessened with the talent increasing around him. And on top of that, not only did the linebacker room improve, the DB room improved, but the D-line stayed at least the same, right? Like we expect progression out of the edges, a guy like Nick Benito, who was fighting with PS2 to go get Defensive Player of the Year last year with the type of season that he especially ended out on. Multiple pick sixes from the edge. He was getting to the quarterback like the best in the league. And across from him, you have a 7th round pick who's developed into a true starter in Jonathan Cooper. And then the big beefy guys up front, Zach Allen goes out and is one of the best defensive tackles. You've got some guys around him, John Franklin Myers, who again, I think will be the last season here, but he was super solid for us last year. A guy like DJ Jones and some rotation behind him. And this defense looks somehow scarier than it did last year, where I think last year it was putting the fear of God into opponents. So this season for the Denver Broncos, I think could only be a success. I think we're going to give the Chiefs a run for the division title. And truthfully, I really do think the sky's the limit for this team. I'm not saying I definitely would I love to see us win the Super Bowl? Sure. It's not going to happen. I'm a realistic fan. I watch too much football to think that a second-year team like this is going to go and win the Super Bowl. But do I think if we end up in a playoff game against the Buffalo Bills again, that we're not going to be able to hold our own and be able to stand our ground? Absolutely. I think this young team saw what it meant to win some games, to get on a streak, to have teams kind of look you down, and last year they had to go through the sadness of losing a playoff game. So I do think there's going to be a chip on some of these guys' shoulders from that. And like I said, across the board, it seems like the roster got better. Across the board, from, the 53rd man on the roster to, well, I can't really say the first player on the roster because I don't know how much better you get than, the best DB since Darrelle Revis, right? I just think this year is going to be something super special, and I'm excited to see what this team does. I wouldn't be shocked if PS2 doesn't go get a back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year, if Nick Benito doesn't put himself in those conversations, and if we're not looking at, this wide receiver room, it's having a true number 2, and I don't necessarily know who that's going to be at this moment, but the fact that there's a guy like Marvin Mims, a guy like Troy Franklin, and a guy like Pat, who all could have chances to be that true number 2 receiver. It's going to take a lot of, pressure off of Cortland. Evan Ingram's going to open it up and make it easier for that number 2 to really kind of develop into that mold. And I think it's going to be an exciting year for the Denver Broncos. If I had to pick a record, we could even go game by game. And I will try to be as unbiased as possible, but I truly do think that this team has the opportunity to push Kansas City for the division title, a Chiefs team that obviously is in the midst of a dynasty, but has seen some decline in the roster, has seen a lot of turnover in the roster, just is coming off of kind of a heartbreaking loss and beatdown from the Eagles in the Super Bowl. and a team that's kind of held the division crown really since the Broncos went to the Super Bowl and won it with Peyton Manning and Von Miller. But when you look at this season, I think there's a lot of room for the Broncos to win. I think we're going to open it up easily, putting Cam Ward in probably hell that he's never wanted to be in to start the season at Denver. 2:00 game. The rookie quarterback's going to struggle, and I think we start off 1-0. Then we go to the Colts. I believe that's going to be 2-0. That's a quarterback situation that they don't know what they're dealing with, and they weren't, frankly, that good last year either. If Daniel Jones is your option, you're probably going to lose a lot of football games. I think at least we're going to split with the Chargers. That puts us at 3 wins. Obviously, last year versus the Bengals was a phenomenal game, and considering their defense and their offensive line has only gotten worse, I'm going to say that we take that one too as a rising team. So that puts us at 4-1. We'll probably lose to the defending champs and the Eagles. That's 4-2. The Jets with Justin Fields, I'm sure, are going to be kind of a fun team to watch, but not a very good team. And though it is a London game, so it does kind of throw a wrench into things of what could happen, I again think we're going to go win there. So that puts us at a 5-2 record, right? The Giants, I don't think Russell Wilson's going to be able to walk into Denver and win a game, considering he only has one chance this year, and he had a couple years where he was playing here at home and couldn't win games. So I'm sure we're going to beat the Giants regardless of the quarterback situation, though I'm hoping it's Jameis Winston at that point, because that is the DT jersey retirement ceremony, and I'm super, super excited for that game. Then the Cowboys come to town. Again, the Cowboys are kind of a disaster right now. That would be 7-2. We're going to say the Texans probably take a game that's probably a trap game, coming off of 2 games at home to Texas. I would give the Texans that game, putting it at 7-3. I don't think the Raiders are going to be very good, but out of fairness, I will give them a sweep. So that's 8-4, and a split. And out of fairness, I'll give the Chiefs a split. That's, I think, pretty fair considering they're definitely going to be the best 2 teams in the division. And that then puts you at 9-5. Then you get a super interesting game against the Commanders. Sunday night game, Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, year 2, who wins that? I'm going to give it to the Commanders just because they were able to go further last year. So that puts us at 9-6, I think, if I'm doing my math right. The Packers then come to town. It's going to be late in the season. I don't know what Jordan Love's injuries are going to look like at that point. I'm sure the Packers defense is going to be very, very good at that point. But frankly, the Broncos defense is much better, and unless one of those Packers receivers like Matthew Golden, the rookie, proves themselves to be a true number 1 threat, I don't see them having the firepower to keep up with this Broncos offense. So that's 10 wins. The Jags, that's 11 wins, even though I think they'll be a little bit better this year. So I think, we're looking at another 10 to 12 win season out of the Broncos, and the Chiefs are going to be right in that territory, giving us a chance to really take a bite at the division title and hopefully a home playoff game for the first time in years in Denver. Regardless, hopefully you guys did enjoy. What is your favorite move that the Broncos made this offseason, and how good do you think they'll be for this season? And do you think that they're going to be better or better than the Chiefs this season? A lot of questions that we're going to have a lot of answers to here very soon. And I'm excited for football season, and I hope that you guys are too. With that said, it's been your boy Dom from Breaker Sports. Appreciate you all watching, and I will catch y'all next time. Peace out, guys.